My name is Claire Morgan. I'm 26 years old, and the night I moved into my brother's house was the night I learned just how cruel family could be. I stood there on his porch, clutching my suitcase, hoping for warmth. But instead, I got a sentence that stung more than any slap. His wife looked me in the eyes and said, "You'll be sleeping in the basement." In that single moment, everything shifted, and I knew I was about to face something far darker than just cold concrete walls. White right pointing backhand index before I share what happened next. Tell me where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. The first gust of heat hit me when the door opened, but it wasn't enough to thaw the ice in Sarah's voice. My brother Michael stood in the doorway, shoulders tense, eyes flicking nervously between his wife and me. For a split second, I thought he might tell her to stop, that families should stand together. But he didn't. He just stepped aside, motioning for me to come in. The house smelled faintly of cinnamon and wood polish, the way homes do when someone takes pride in them. I wanted to breathe it in and feel safe. Instead, the sound of Sarah's heels clicking against the hardwood floor followed me like a warning bell. "You'll find the basement down the hall," she said flatly. Her lips curled upward, but it wasn't a smile. It was victory. I tried to laugh it off. "The basement? Is this some kind of joke?" Her eyes didn't blink. "No joke. We need the guest room for storage." I looked at Michael, silently begging him to intervene, to remember I was his little sister who had nowhere else to go. He swallowed hard but kept his mouth shut. That silence hurt worse than her words. Dragging my suitcase down the hall, I felt my cheeks burn with humiliation. The basement door creaked when I opened it, a tired, old sound that seemed to echo her message. "You don't belong here." The steps groaned under my feet as I descended. Each creak felt like judgment. The air grew colder, heavier. By the time I reached the bottom, my hands were stiff from the chill. A single dangling bulb lit the room with a sickly yellow glow. Concrete floors stretched out beneath me, damp and unforgiving. Cobwebs clung to the corners, and an old dresser leaned against one wall like it had given up on life. And there, in the far corner, was a cot. Not a bed, not even a futon, just a cot with a sunken mattress and a blanket that smelled faintly of dust and mothballs. I sat down on it, the springs whining as though they, too, resented my weight. Upstairs, muffled laughter floated down. Sarah's laugh was sharp, triumphant, like she'd already won whatever game she thought we were playing. I pulled the thin blanket around me and stared at the ceiling. Pipes crisscrossed above, and every so often, one of them groaned as if mocking me. I tried to close my eyes, but the humiliation gnawed at me. Family was supposed to be safe, but I felt like an intruder in a place that should have been mine too. That first night, sleep didn't come easy. I turned on my side, then my back, then curled into a ball, but the cold concrete beneath the cot seeped into my bones. At one point, I heard Sarah's voice upstairs, low and sharp, then Michael's weaker reply. They were talking about me. I couldn't make out the words, but I didn't need to. I knew I wasn't wanted. Around midnight, I sat up. My eyes caught something odd, a patch of wall in the corner, just behind the old dresser. It didn't match the rest. The bricks looked newer, the mortar uneven. For a moment, curiosity stared, but I was too tired, too beaten down to care. I lay back down, telling myself it was just bad construction. The days that followed were no easier. Sarah didn't miss a chance to remind me of my place. When she passed me in the kitchen, she'd raise an eyebrow and mutter, "Basement girl." When Michael was around, she softened her tone, pretending civility, but the moment he turned his back, her words turned sharp again. Michael, he disappointed me most. He'd grown up protecting me, but now, he stood silently by, letting his wife decide my worth. One morning, I asked him gently, "Do you really think it's right, me sleeping down there?" He looked at his coffee, then at her, and finally whispered, "It's just temporary, Claire. Don't make this harder." Those words lodged in my chest like a stone. At night, the basement grew colder. The bulb flickered sometimes, threatening to plunge me into total darkness. I wrapped myself tighter in the blanket, listening to the sounds of the house above, footsteps, doors closing, laughter I wasn't part of. Every noise was a reminder that life went on upstairs while I was buried below. But the more time I spent there, the more that uneven wall bothered me. I caught myself staring at it while brushing my teeth, while unpacking my bag, even in the middle of the night when sleep wouldn't come. It didn't belong, and neither did I. Somehow, we were the same. One evening, when the silence pressed too heavy, I dragged the dresser forward just an inch. Dust scattered into the air, and a small trail of cobwebs snapped loose. My fingers brushed against the rough brick. The mortar crumbled slightly at my touch. Something was hidden here. I didn't know what, but I felt it in my gut. Still, I pushed the dresser back into place. I wasn't ready. Not yet. For now, I had to survive the humiliation, the whispers, the loneliness. I told myself I'd endure. But deep inside, beneath the shame and hurt, another feeling stirred. One Sarah never expected me to have. Determination. This basement might have been her way of shoving me down, but I would rise from it. Somehow, I would. And when I did, she wouldn't see me as the girl banished to the basement. She'd see me as the woman who turned that punishment into power. The nights grew longer, or maybe they just felt that way. Down in the basement, time didn't move the same as it did upstairs. I had no windows, no sunrise to break the dark. Only the low hum of the furnace and the occasional drip from a leaky pipe to remind me I wasn't buried alive. But sometimes, when the house settled and the silence grew thick, I could swear I heard something else. Something that wasn't just the house. It started on the third night. I was half asleep, curled tight under the thin blanket, when I heard it. A faint murmur, like a voice carried through a tunnel. I sat up, heart pounding, straining to catch it again. At first, I thought it was Sarah talking upstairs, maybe on the phone. But the sound wasn't coming from above, it was coming from the wall. The same uneven wall I'd noticed before. I rubbed my arms, the chill cutting deeper now, and leaned closer. My ear nearly touched the bricks. The sound was clearer, a whisper, broken and muffled, as if someone was speaking from the other side. I stumbled back, my pulse hammering. No. I whispered to myself, it's just the pipes. But I knew pipes didn't whisper. The next morning, I tried to shake it off. Sarah breezed past me in the kitchen, tossing a sarcastic, "Sleep well, basement girl." Michael avoided my eyes, like he always did now. I forced myself to smile, but my mind stayed tethered to that wall. That night, I listened again. This time, the whisper came sooner, almost as if it was waiting for me. Claire. I froze. My name. I heard my name. The basement air turned heavy, pressing on my chest. I backed away until the cot dug into the back of my legs. Who's there? My voice cracked, half fear, half anger. Silence. Only the furnace humming again, as if mocking me. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat on the edge of the cot, staring at the wall. My thoughts ran wild. Was I losing my mind? Was Sarah trying to trick me somehow? No, she wouldn't go that far, would she? By morning, I convinced myself it was exhaustion. I'd had so much stress since moving in. Of course my mind was playing tricks. But by the fifth night, there was no denying it anymore. The whispers came again. Longer this time. They don't know. Hidden. I pressed closer, palms flat against the cold brick. My breath fogged in the chilled air. What do you mean? Hidden where? Nothing. Just the groan of the pipes again. I paced the floor, running my fingers through my hair. I wanted to scream. Sarah thought banishing me to the basement was punishment, but she had no idea what this place was holding. The next evening, when Michael came down to hand me a pile of folded laundry, I decided to test the waters. Mike, I said, keeping my voice casual, did anyone ever, I don't know, build anything strange down here? He frowned, setting the clothes on the dresser. What do you mean? I shrugged. The wall. Over there. It doesn't look right. His eyes flicked toward it for the briefest second before he forced a smile. It's an old house, Claire. Half of it doesn't look right. But his tone was too quick, too defensive. I caught the twitch in his jaw. After he left, I sat on the cot, my mind spinning. Michael knew something. Maybe not everything, but he knew enough to avoid that wall. The whispers returned that night, clearer than ever. I leaned close, straining every muscle to hear. Find it, yours. My skin prickled. The words lodged in me like a secret I wasn't meant to know. The next day, I couldn't stop myself. While Sarah was out shopping and Michael was at work, I pushed the dresser aside. Dust swirled up in the dim light, clinging to my throat. I pressed my hands to the uneven bricks. They crumbled slightly beneath my touch, softer than the rest. I knocked, lightly at first, then harder. The sound was different, hollow. Behind that wall, something waited. I didn't know what. I didn't know why. But suddenly, the basement wasn't just my punishment. It was a puzzle. That night, when Sarah called down the stairs with her mocking, sing-song voice, "Lights out! Basement girl!" I didn't flinch the way I used to. I pulled the blanket tight around me, eyes fixed on the wall. The whispers came again, low and insistent, curling around me in the dark. And this time, I whispered back, "What are you trying to tell me?" The pipes groaned. The bulb flickered. My breath caught as the faintest reply slipped through. "Look deeper." I didn't sleep after that. I couldn't. My mind was already digging through the possibilities, the memories of how Michael avoided the wall, the way Sarah seemed oddly smug about sending me down here. Whatever was hidden in this basement, it wasn't meant to be found. But I was done being the girl they banished. The whispers had chosen me. I didn't wait long after that final whisper. The words "look deeper" rang in my ears with every breath I took, like a drumbeat under my skin. Whatever secret the basement held, I knew it was meant for me. The next morning, when the house was quiet, I dragged the old dresser completely away from the wall. Dust coated my fingers, clinging to my skin, as if the house itself was warning me not to disturb what had been hidden for so long. I coughed, wiped my hands on my jeans, and pressed hard against the uneven bricks. The first one gave way, just a fraction of an inch, but it moved. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just a strange wall. It was a seal. I leaned my shoulder into it, pushing harder until one brick slid loose and clattered onto the concrete floor. Behind it was darkness, thick, unyielding, like the inside of a locked chest. I froze. If Sarah or Michael came downstairs right now, I wouldn't have an explanation. I could already hear Sarah's mocking voice. Basement girl's been scratching at the walls like a rat. But curiosity had its claws in me. I reached inside the hole, my fingers brushing against something rough. Wood. I tugged, and with a grunt, pulled free a small, dust-caked box. My hands shook as I set it on the cot, the metal latch cold beneath my thumb. It clicked open. Inside were papers, yellowed, brittle, edges curled with time. My eyes darted over them, my breath hitching as I realized what I was holding. Property deeds. Old ones. The name on them wasn't Sarah's, or Michael's. It was my father's. I sat back hard, the air rushing from my lungs. This house, the house they mocked me in, banished me beneath. It had been ours. No, more than that. It was still mine. I shuffled through the stack, each page confirming it. My father had purchased the property decades ago, left it in his name, never transferring ownership. After he passed, it should have fallen to me. But Sarah had stood in my face, arms crossed, smirking, telling me I didn't belong here. And Michael, he knew. That's why he avoided the wall. That's why he shut down my questions. I swallowed hard, my chest burning with a mix of rage and vindication. The whispers hadn't been in my head. They'd been guiding me to this, to the proof of everything I'd been denied. But proof wasn't enough. Not yet. I needed to know why. That night, I slid the box beneath the cot, hidden where Sarah's prying eyes wouldn't find it. When Michael came down with a load of laundry, I forced myself to stay calm. "Rough day?" he asked, setting the basket on the dresser. His tone was careful, too careful. "Fine," I said quickly, folding my arms. "You ever think about Dad? About what he left behind?" Michael stiffened. His eyes flicked to the wall again, just for a second, but it was enough. "Why are you asking that now?" His voice was sharp, defensive. I bit back my anger. "No reason. Just wondering." He didn't answer. He grabbed the empty basket and climbed the stairs, leaving me alone with the truth pressing heavy in my chest. The next few days were torture. Sarah grew bolder in her taunts, tossing comments down the stairs like scraps to a dog. "Don't get too comfortable, Claire. Basements aren't permanent solutions." I wanted to scream back at her, "This house isn't yours." But I kept quiet, clutching the papers at night like a lifeline. The whispers retained too, softer now, almost satisfied. Every time I pressed my ear to the wall, I felt less fear and more certainty. The basement hadn't broken me. It had armed me. But I still needed more. Proof wasn't enough if it stayed hidden in the dark. So I began my quiet investigation. When Sarah left her purse unattended on the counter, I skimmed through, finding receipts for home repairs charged to her credit card. When Michael dropped his guard, I caught glimpses of the bills stacked on his desk, all addressed to resident. Never a name, never official. They had no legal claim. None at all. And they knew it. One evening, as I sat on the cot reading through the faded signatures on the deeds, Sarah's voice cut through the air like a blade. "What are you doing?" I shoved the papers under the blanket, heart racing. "Nothing. Just reading." She narrowed her eyes, suspicion dripping from every word. "You look guilty. What are you hiding?" I forced a laugh. "Sarah, I live in a basement. What could I possibly be hiding?" She stayed a moment longer, then rolled her eyes. "You're weird," she muttered, climbing the stairs. I didn't breathe until I heard the door slam shut. That was too close. I had to move faster. That night, I laid the papers out across the cot, tracing every line of ink with trembling fingers. My father's name, his signature, the official seal, it was all there. Proof that this house, the very one Sarah used to humiliate me, had always been mine. I whispered into the silence, not sure if I was speaking to my father, to myself, or to the shadows that had guided me here. "I'll make it right. I promise." The basement didn't feel so cold anymore. The walls no longer pressed in. They held me, shielded me. And the whispers, faint but steady, echoed back with the one truth I clung to. I wasn't powerless. Not anymore. I sat at the long oak table that evening, the kind of table that looked polished for show but carried no warmth. My brother, Mark, and his wife, Rachel, had prepared a spread that smelled of roasted chicken, garlic bread, and something green to make it appear balanced. From the outside, it might have looked like a cozy family dinner. Inside, it felt like a stage set for humiliation. Rachel set down a basket of bread rolls in front of me, but didn't look at me. Instead, she leaned toward my brother and whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "Careful. Tenants don't usually get the best portions." Her words cut sharper than any knife on that table. My cheeks burned, but I forced myself to keep still, tearing off a small piece of bread like it didn't matter. My brother chuckled awkwardly, as if he didn't quite approve but didn't dare correct her either. That silence, his silence, was worse than the insult itself. The clinking of silverware filled the air, but every scrape sounded like an accusation. I tried to focus on my plate, on the way the butter softened against the warm bread, but all I could hear were their voices circling me like vultures. Rachel kept going, little comments disguised as jokes. "Hope the basement isn't too drafty. Maybe we should buy her a thicker blanket. Mark. Imagine being a guest in your own family. Strange, isn't it?" Mark smiled faintly at each one, his eyes flicking down at his plate. Not once did he look at me. Not once did he push back. I swallowed the lump in my throat, telling myself to breathe. I had kept quiet long enough. Tonight, the game was going to change. Rachel, I said, keeping my voice even, do you ever wonder who really owns this house? Her fork froze mid-A. For the first time all night, she looked directly at me, her smirk faltering. What's that supposed to mean? I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch. My hands didn't shake. My heart didn't race. All those nights in the basement, hearing whispers through the floorboards, every cutting remark I endured, they had prepared me for this exact moment. This house, I said slowly, isn't yours. It isn't even Mark's. It's mine. The room fell into stunned silence. Mark's fork clattered against his plate. Rachel blinked rapidly, like she hadn't quite processed the words. That's ridiculous, she said, her laugh sharp and humorless. We've lived here for years. She gestured with her fork, staying with us. Don't make up stories to make yourself feel important. I reached into my bag, the leather creaking softly as I pulled out a folded stack of papers. I placed them gently on the table, sliding them toward her across the polished wood. Deed and mortgage records, I said. Signed in my name. Paid in full. Mark's face drained of color. He reached for the papers with trembling hands, scanning the signatures, the dates, the unmistakable proof. Claire, he whispered, why didn't you ever tell us? Rachel snatched the papers from him, flipping through them frantically, her eyes narrowing with every line she read. No, she muttered. This can't be real. But it was, and she knew it. I leaned forward, lowering my voice, making sure every word hit like a hammer. You ordered me to the basement, Rachel. You called me a burden. You laughed at me, in my own house. And all this time, you never realized who held the keys above your head. The silence was so thick I could hear the clock ticking in the hallway. Rachel's hand shook as she set the papers down, her confidence slipping through her fingers like sand. She tried to recover, her chin lifting defiantly. So what? If this is true, then you've been lying. Living under our roof. Letting us believe. Your roof. I cut in, sharper than I intended. Every night I slept downstairs, I reminded myself whose roof this actually was. You made me feel small in a place that was mine all along. Mark finally spoke, his voice unsteady. Rachel, we owe her an apology. Rachel's jaw clenched, her eyes darting between him and me. She wanted to fight back, to claw at anything she could use, but the papers sat in front of her like an unmovable wall. I didn't wait for her apology. I didn't need it. I'm not here to beg for respect anymore, I said. I don't need to. You've both shown me exactly who you are. And now, you get to live with the knowledge that this house, this table, these walls, they belong to the person you shoved into the basement. I stood, pushing back my chair. The leg scraped against the hardwood, loud and final. Rachel flinched at the sound. The roasted chicken sat untouched, steam curling upward. The garlic bread no longer smelled warm. It smelled stale, heavy, suffocating. I looked around one last time, letting the truth settle over them like a storm cloud that would never leave. You called me a tenant, I said softly, but I was the landlord all along. And with that, I turned and walked away from the table, leaving them to choke on their silence. The night air felt cooler than I remembered. Stepping out of that dining room, leaving the thick tension behind, was like walking out of a cage I had lived in far too long. My heels clicked against the porch steps, each sound sharp, steady, final. For the first time in months, I wasn't rushing. I wasn't hiding. I was leaving on my terms. The stars hung above me, scattered like silver dust across a black canvas. The same stars I had stared at through the basement window, tiny and distant, now stretched wide and endless. I breathed in deeply, letting the air fill my lungs. It didn't just feel like oxygen, it felt like freedom. Behind me, I could hear muffled voices. Rachel's hissed anger, Mark's weak attempts to calm her. but none of it touched me anymore. Their words, their judgments, their power, they had no weight outside those walls. I wasn't carrying them with me. I walked to my car, my hand brushing against the cold metal of the door handle. For a second, I hesitated, glancing back at the house. The windows glowed warmly, but inside I knew the warmth was fake, a fragile shell cracked open by truth. That house had held my pain, my silence, my humiliation. But it also held my proof, my victory, my name written on its very foundation. I smiled, not with triumph, but with peace. They could sit at that polished table and stew in their disbelief, but I was done sitting in the shadows. Sliding into the driver's seat, I let my hands rest on the steering wheel. My reflection stared back at me in the rearview mirror, not the girl who had been banished to the basement, but the woman who had taken her power back. My eyes looked different, steadier, sharper, alive. The engine hummed softly when I turned the key, but I didn't drive just yet. Instead, I let my thoughts wander back to the nights when I curled up on a thin mattress with a blanket that never felt warm enough, to the whispers above me, the laughter at my expense, the moments when I almost believed their lies about who I was. Every memory sharpened me, like stone shaping steel. And then I thought about the moment I laid those papers on the dinner table, the silence that followed, Rachel's face draining of smug certainty, Mark's shaking hands. That single moment where the entire balance of power shifted, where I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was standing. That was the night my story changed. I placed my hand on the passenger seat, where the folder with the deed still lay. The proof of everything. But strangely, I didn't need it anymore. I could have left those papers on the table and never looked back, because the real proof wasn't on paper. It was in me, in the way I refused to break. A faint breeze rustled through the trees, carrying the sound of crickets. For the first time in months, the world didn't feel heavy. It felt wide open, full of possibilities waiting for me to claim. My phone buzzed on the console. A message from Mark. I'm sorry. I stayed at it, the screen glowing in the dark. For a brief moment, I considered replying. Maybe once, I would have leapt at those two words, desperate for validation, desperate to believe they meant something. But now, I didn't need them. Apologies without change were just empty air, and I had no space left for emptiness. I locked the screen and set the phone face down. Shifting the car into drive, I pressed gently on the accelerator. The tires rolled across the gravel, each crunching sound pulling me further away from the house, further away from the weight of the past. As the road opened before me, I thought about where I might go. Not just tonight, but beyond. Maybe a small apartment with windows that let in sunlight instead of shadows. Maybe a coffee shop where I could sit by the window and read without wondering what insults waited at the dinner table upstairs. Maybe even traveling, seeing places where no one knew me as the tenant, only as Claire, the woman who walked away from chains and found her own freedom. The more I thought, the lighter I felt. Street lights flickered overhead, casting long streaks of gold across the windshield. I rolled down the window, letting the night wind whip through my hair. It felt wild, untamed, exactly what I needed. For so long, I had let others define me. Their words, their labels, their power plays. Tonight, I had shattered all of it, not by screaming, not by fighting, but by standing in truth so undeniable, it silenced them all. And as I drove, I realized something. This wasn't just about owning a house. It was about owning myself. The girl in the basement had been banished, forgotten, dismissed. But the woman driving down this quiet road had risen. Rachel would stew in her bitterness. Mark would wrestle with his guilt. And that house would remain a constant reminder to them of the sister they underestimated, the sister who held the deed, not just to the walls they lived in, but to her own future. I turned the corner, the house vanishing from my rearview mirror. For the first time, I didn't look back. Ahead of me stretched the open road, the hum of the tires steady and sure. Freedom didn't roar. It whispered softly, like the wind through the trees, like the steady beat of a heart that had finally found peace. And in that quiet, I smiled. Because I wasn't just walking away. I was walking toward something far greater. Toward myself.